An energy crisis is looming, which is apparent in the rise of prices for both oil and gas. Those relying on both will feel the brunt, and there isn't a nation on earth that can live without it, or live without them. Oil is over $83 a barrel currently, and gas is over $5.5. Why is this relevant? Because the onset of winter will affect people, and especially in cold areas. With inflation on the rise, the pandemic remaining with us for some time, the supply chains affected, then prices rising. This rise is affecting commodities, and many countries import those. For those that have not taken their precautions and anticipated global trends, there will be challenges. With this in mind, agricultural projects that are expanding in this country, as well as localizing many industries, might be a major catalyst for mitigating negative effects of the upcoming energy crunch. Good evening. You're watching The Business Insider, and I'm Ayman Salah. Our weekly program tackles events affecting economies and business, and we aim to bring you the inside story. Welcome back to the Business Insider. Let's start with our news. The first item, Egypt's economy is expected to grow 5% in fiscal year 2021-2022, up from 3.3% in 2020-2021. That's according to the World Bank's October 2021 MENA economic update. Its forecast marks an upward revision from April by 0.5% for this fiscal year. However, it is still lower than the 5.2% projected by the IMF. This economic recovery is seen dominating oil importing countries' performance this year, with overall real GDP growth among them expected to come in at 4.3% by the end of 2021. The public sector in Egypt is expected to account for a greater share of growth, with 14% year-on-year increase in public investments in the first quarter 2021 compared to a 43% drop in nominal private investments during the same 3 months. Now for the second news item, importers are no longer, or will no longer, need to get invoices stamped from chambers of commerce abroad. That's to clear their goods at Egyptian ports. This is a decision by the customs authority. Instead, they will only need to give a broken down commercial invoice that contains a detailed description of the packing list. This decision is based on the recently issued executive regulations of the Customs Act, which aims to expedite customs clearance. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Business Insider. I'm Ayman Salah. Tonight I have the pleasure to host Dr. Ibrahim Mostafa, the former advisor to the Minister of Investment. A pleasure having you on the show here tonight.
Thank you, Ayman. Thank you.
We're discussing the world economic outlook, the effects on this country. Let's watch this report and then start our discussion. We'll be back.
The IMF slightly downgraded its projection for global growth in 2021 to 5.9% in its October World Economic Outlook report. That's down a slim 0.1 percentage points from 6% in its last update in July. It maintained its growth estimate for 2022 steady at 4.9%, adding that global growth would taper down beyond next year to average at 3.3% in the medium term. The report warns that global growth risks are tilted on the downside, while inflation risks are skewed to the upside. There are few surprises when it comes to what's behind the increased uncertainty over the recovery. The spread of the Delta COVID-19 variant, supply chain disruptions, price hikes, risky financial markets, and the growing impact of climate change. According to the IMF, a principal common factor behind these complex challenges is the continued grip of the pandemic on global society. calling on developed nations to enhance their global vaccination efforts. On the national level, the IMF advises policymakers that they will need to tread the thin line, continuing a support to the recovery while also keeping a watchful eye on inflation. The outlook for the low-income developing countries groups has darkened considerably due to worsening pandemic dynamics and rising inflation and inevitable monetary tightening. It will induce rich countries, will inflict the most pain in low-income countries already suffering from a hike in food prices. The overarching message is that the widening divide between developed and developing economies has disastrous consequences for all. The MENA region, on the other hand, is doing relatively well, with the IMF revising its growth projection upwards by 0.4% to 4.1% in 2022. As for Egypt, its performance remains above 5% to 5.2% in the FY 2021 to 2022, which is more optimistic than the World Bank's expectations of 5% for 2021-2022. The IMF kept its long-term estimates for Egypt's growth steady at 5.8% for 2025-2026.
Welcome back to the Business Insider. So our discussion tonight is on the world economic outlook, the effect on this country and the region. Our guest tonight, Dr. Ibrahim Mostafa, former advisor to the Minister of Investment. A pleasure once more having you on the show. First of all, before we start, let me just touch on one development. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi returned to Egypt after a 3-day visit to Budapest in Hungary, where he attended the Visegrad Egypt conference. What would you say is the significance of the visit?
I think it's very important because it's the third time that President Sisi is visiting Hungary since 2015, then 2017. And this year as well. 2017, he also participated in the same summit, Visegrad. Then it's very important, this summit, because it's considered the fifth,
Session.
block. The fifth block. After inside the European continent, from the economic, side point of view. In addition to that, he discussed many issues in this summit regarding, fighting the terrorism as well as illegal immigration, enhancing the bilateral trade and investment relations between these countries. In addition to that, he stressed, the importance of the Egyptian rights in the River Nile in general, stressing that Egypt is very keen to continue, the negotiations with other parties regarding this issue. I think it's very important because it's a kind of enhancing this kind of relationship between both countries and other countries participating in this summit. So it's one of the what I call, important visits that, regarding the foreign policy of the Egyptian of Egypt, to brand Egypt in different summits and in several summits, with all countries around the world, stressing the rights of Egypt in several topics, as well as enhancing the investment and trade and relations between these countries.
One of the important highlights was the President's statements on illegal immigration, as well as on human rights. And here he always links these issues with economic development. How do you see this, and what would you say can be considered the main outcomes of the visit?
Prince stressed that, it was the first priority is to rebalance the economy first, then started to take care of the Egyptian citizens with different initiatives like Haya Karim and others, and ended by launching the
Decent Life Initiative.
The general strategy of human rights in Egypt that has been appreciated by all parties in this summit. It's very important because he thanked Hungary because of their support to the Egyptian status under the European Union umbrella. I think it's very important, I mean, to highlight these issues among in this summit. I mean, in front of, I mean, to all audience attend this summit.
All right. From here, we have to take note of the reports that are now being issued, especially after the meetings of the World Bank and the IMF. And what we notice is that there are a number of challenges, and there are a number of facts that are on the ground. Of them is a global rise in inflation. Now, inflation at a time when there's a slowing in the purchasing power is not very healthy globally. What would you say are the factors leading to this global rise in inflation?
This I can refer this issue to several reasons. The first thing is the uncertainty in the in the global economy because of the pandemic. Still there is uncertainty about when the full recovery will happen. This is one side. The other side is about the energy crisis in the world because of the increasing prices of oil and gas. The gas exceeded $50, and
the gas exceeded $5.
Yeah, $5.
5.5.
And the oil is expected to hit, I mean, $100 per barrel, and this is very this didn't happen. I mean, this hasn't happened since 2014 actually. And this will affect all prices around the world because the natural gas is very important input in the fertilizers, which will affect all, I mean,
commodities.
All commodities. I mean, food, mainly food products. I mean, greens. I mean, all. I mean, whether as well as, I mean, the other inputs of the industry products, whether
petrochemicals
and all industrial products. I mean, because when you have this, I mean, the demand of the Chinese demand after the pandemic has increased very aggressively, because every country after the pandemic started to recover its economy by increasing the production, but they faced, I mean, the issue of limits that all governments started to put on using the fossil fuel, which means that, I mean, the capacity of producing such fuel will be affected by all producers, and they has to decrease their production in this area to enhance the green economy in the world. They are encouraging all countries to start investing in the renewable energy, to focus on this area more than the traditional oil and gas sector. And if you remember that all countries, I mean, most of the countries were looking their economy, I mean, during the pandemic, and which affected all the production capacity of all countries, and this, I mean, affected, I mean, increasing producing the produce around the world. Countries like Egypt who put just, I mean, partial, I mean, lockdown of the economy hasn't been affected like countries, I mean, applied the full lockdown of their economies. That's why, I mean, the countries affected by the lockdown, the full lockdown, started to demand, I mean, inputs and intermediate products to restore their capacity in producing their produce. Chinese and other countries like European countries as well, starting, I mean, we are very close to the winter, which means that, I mean, the demand on energy in general will be very high, because, I mean, heating the homes and houses in European countries will this is very important thing in winter, and they will expect, I mean, having this demand, high demand on this side, and the prices will increase because of this increasing demand. And that's why people are analysts are saying that prices will be increasing during the coming months, whether in all sectors actually. If you read about, I mean, the electronic shops that Opel factory in Germany that introduces Grandland type of cars has closed, I mean, for a while, because they have shortage in electronic shops. And this is, I mean, very important thing that you have, where you will face, I mean, shortage in different products. That this means that the demand will be very increasing, and the supply doesn't recover this increase in demand. That's why the pricing will increase during the coming months. And this will affect, I mean, other countries are importing from outside, like Egypt, because it imports, I mean...
Before we get into Egypt, one of the other factors, would you say, is the shipping? The cost
This is
shipping?
one of the things that, I mean, this, I mean, started, I mean, during the pandemic side, and still it's an issue because, I mean, shipping didn't get back to their normal, I mean, operations as it was before, I mean, before the pandemic. And this raised, I mean, the cost of shipping around the world in the last month, actually. That's why, I mean, the produce, as well as one of the impact that affected increasing prices, is the shipment cost.
One of my acquaintances, we were having this discussion, and he told me that the shipping component in a container for an item used to cost $7.
Yeah.
Now it's costing $17.
I mean, look, just in this regard, I told you that most of the companies were working under capacity. They reduced their capacities, I mean, working in different sectors. Shipping and logistics sector was one of these sectors that all companies reduced their operations around the world, because, I mean, most of the ports were closed during the pandemic, and that's, I mean, that means that no products were shipped to other countries, and the cost was very high in that time. That's why they stopped, I mean, all the logistics operations around the world. And when they started to restore their operations, it wasn't easy to get the full capacity directly. It needs time.
So there's a shortage in the containers.
Yeah, as well that, I mean, the oil prices and all the produce related to the oil sector in this side, I mean, they use the fuel, as well as the fuel are increasing currently. That's why, I mean, the cost of shipping has also, as well, because of the under capacity work operation that is being on the ground, in addition to the high prices of the oil that is being fueled to these ships around the world. This is very...
Would you say another factor is the shift in China from using coal to using greener energy?
Yeah, this is, I mean, you know, just there's different calls from different international institutions to all countries to use, I mean, green sources of fuel around the world. That's why they are encouraging all countries to reduce depending on traditional energy, like, I mean,
especially the most industrialized nations,
because of the climate change as well. Because we have a big summit, I mean, in November about the climate change, and they want to review all the policies that have been adopted by all countries regarding, I mean, supporting sustainable environmental issues around the world.
All right, let's move to the effect of the global inflation on this country.
Yeah. Anyway, let me say that we have still a kind of relative stability in the inflation rate. This because of the policies that have been taken by the government during the pandemic time, as well as, I mean, providing all produce in the market during the pandemic from internal production. The expansion that the state has made before the pandemic to produce different and diversified produce, this helped the country to use these produce during the pandemic, and to keep the prices relatively stable, and the marginal increase that wasn't very high, and was affordable to everybody. And I think this very important thing that the government has made during the pandemic. It was very important to highlight the policies and the procedures have been taken by the government was very useful and important to help the economy to recover very quickly.
So localizing production, and expanding on industries, expanding.
Currently, they have, I mean, an initiative from 100 procedures to enhance and support the industry, as well as the SME sector. The government is very keen to help the industry to grow up again by giving them incentives and the healthy atmosphere to grow and to invest more and to expand. And this is very important to increase, imports, and it's under the strategy of the government that has been applying for the last few years to reduce imports, and this will rationalize the demand of the currency as well from one side, and to decrease the budget deficit from other side. And in addition to that, supporting the industry is very important because no country can sustain its development or growth without having this sector and the agricultural sector as well as working very well inside the country.
What about the local inflation? Here you have around 6.6% last month. That was up from 5.7% in August. That's considered the highest annual inflation rate since January 2020 when it hit 7.2%. So the headline inflation rose 1.1%.
It's still within the target of the central bank. The central bank put 7.58. This is the average rate of the inflation rate inside Egypt, and still we are around this average, and under this average in general. Actually, as you said, it was 6.6 in last month. But in the annual average is still under 8, and this is very important to us to control the inflation rate. To help the economy stabilize more in the coming months.
All right. Now, according to
and to keep the prices relatively stable as well.
According to CAPMAS, which is the official figures, the authority that is in charge of the figures and statistics in this country, food and education prices were the main drivers of the inflation growth. Now, with the rise in fuel prices, do we need to be worried?
For the time being, no. But in the coming few months, after following up the prices of oil, we should consider this in our calculations because it's very important because you are using this, the energy produced, whether oil and gas, in your industry, which means that increasing the prices of these products will affect, the prices of oil products in Egypt, whether food and transportation as well, because when transportation increases, this will affect all produce prices inside Egypt. In addition to that, education will increase because the demand in education is very high, and the demand, the supply in this sector is still under capacity. That's why you see high demand on several schools, whether national or international. And that's why the government is working very hard to increase the capacity of the educational system, whether before the university or after, or during the universities. That's why increasing the universities in Egypt is very important, and the government has done well, very well in this regard by opening several universities in several governorates, to cope up with the needs of the market and to absorb. People are graduating from secondary stage inside Egypt. In addition to that, Egypt is keen about introducing new sections, new fields inside the universities, whether applied technologies and other things related to the technology side. We have specialized university in this side because we have a very strong strategy with vision and hopes to apply the digitalization very aggressively in the coming years.
All right. Let me go back to a point that you mentioned. You were talking about the transportation cost. Doesn't this bring the rail cargo projects to the forefront to highlight the importance of such a project to decrease the transportation costs?
Yeah, but that's why the Egyptian government is keen about developing this area of transportation by focusing on the infrastructure to increase the capacity of railways inside Egypt, whether for passengers or cargoes as well, both ways. Very keen to introduce very well-serviced trains in both sides. That's why they are building, new railways in different areas. The high-speed train that will link between Alexandria, Ain Sokhna, then new admin capital, to help all, to connect all ports with each others, and to help the industry use this, cheaper tool than other tools like road. Because road is very high risky. In addition to the fuel prices, this will affect, the price of moving commodities between, government rates and between government rates to ports. I think it will help very much, in this regard to introduce a good means to the industry in general, as well as passengers as well.
Let me just go back to the World Bank's report, where they mentioned that the public sector in Egypt has shared in the growth of the economy, 14% year-on-year in public investments, compared to a 43% drop in nominal private investments during the same 3 months.
Yeah, just the Egyptian government is investing very aggressively in the infrastructure, and transportation is one of these sectors, because it's called like enablers to the economy and the investments from a different point of view. Infrastructure is very important, as well as when you ask an investor that what are the main drivers of the economy or the investors to come and to invest in Egypt, they will see about the macro picture from one side, and the political and security stability. Then they will talk about the infrastructure and the investment climate. The infrastructure is very important. That's why the government has been spending very much in this area, whether transportation, new cities with the new applied technology in these cities.
Smart cities.
Yeah, smart cities. All these things are very important. This will, change the country to a better lifestyle, and to compete other neighbors and other cities around the world with these developments. And these developments are very important because they are called thematic projects that are leading the economy to growth, and then starting to drag other sectors with these big investments. In addition to that, you know that what were the main drivers of the Egyptian growth in the past were the public investment from one side, as well as the big market that we have in this country.
The mega projects. Yeah. How do we deal with the rise in inflation?
No, just we are using both policies. The
fiscal,
monetary policy and the fiscal policy, and this kind of coordination between both policies is very important. That happened, during the pandemic, if you remember, when the government introduced several procedures and policies to enhance the economy during this period, with a kind of good and real coordination between government entities. And this side, decreasing the interest during the last 12 months, helped the economy to breathe again. They helped, and they gave a channel. The cost of debt has decreased from one side. Most of the investors were talking about the high interest rate before the pandemic. After the pandemic, the central bank has decreased this interest rate to considerable rates, and this encouraged many investors to start looking again to the debt, to get loans from the banks to help them recover their industries and their factories from one side, and others to start thinking about expansions from the other side. In addition to that, having kind of rationalizing the subsidies from the other side is very important. And when you started to liberalize, I mean, the energy sector from one side gradually to reach, I mean,
Those in
yeah, yeah. This is very important. But I mean, in addition to that, enhancing, I mean, the quality of the services to let the citizen feel about, I mean, they are paying this price for a good service from one side. In addition to that, I mean, trying to digitalize all the government services is very important. This will decrease, I mean, the interaction between
human factor.
Yeah, this is very important. This will decrease, I mean, the time and cost in the procedure as well, because when you digitalize the service, you don't need to move from one side to other side. In addition to that, you know the cost, and you only pay that cost. You don't have to pay other
hidden costs.
Yeah. This tool will help the government as well to fight corruption from the other side, which means, I mean, this corruption put another burden on the investor or the citizens.
It has a high cost
yeah.
as well. Right.
In addition to that, I mean, revising, I mean, the salaries from time to time to cope up with, I mean, the inflation rates to try to recover the bad impact of if we have something that will increase, I mean, the products prices in the future. This is very important when you review, I mean, the salaries from time to time, that to let I mean, the citizens feel that the government is taking care of what's happening around. Starting to reduce, I mean, to revise all costs in the services and the products. So these are very important things that should consider. In addition to that, give certain incentives, special incentives to industry to grow up again and to recover what happened during the pandemic. This will, I mean, create more jobs for people, and this will enhance their living standards by giving decent salaries to them, actually.
The growth expectations, as per the World Bank report, was modified upwards to 5%, which is below the IMF's expectations, which is at 5.2%. Why do you think that there is an upward modification on the part of both?
You are reviewing this, I mean, these rates from time to time. During every 3 months, you review these things because of the.
But there must be factors.
Yeah, I mean,
affecting.
factors are happening around. New factors appeared, and you don't know about, like, I mean, the uncertainty of the pandemic. I mean, impact. Still now, we don't know when it will be fully recovered, and.
Yet our performance is way better than.
Yes, currently, yes,
many.
because you started to, I mean, to import the vaccine from different resources. I mean, you started to give vaccines to many Egyptian citizens, and this is very important because this, I mean, will give a good, I mean, image about the efforts of the Egyptian government has been taking to reduce, I mean, the impact of this pandemic. This will help from the other side. I mean. You know, just, I mean, the limits that other countries put on the tourists to come to Egypt, and this will help other countries to start open up, I mean, the skies with the Egyptian touristic areas. And this is very important because this sector is very important to the Egyptian economy. It's one of the main sources of the hard currency that I think this will be very helping to us in the coming months. And we start to hear good, I mean, response from these countries. Yeah, it started to go back again from Italy, UK, and other countries in Europe.
You mentioned the cost of commodities.
Yeah.
As per the rise of inflation in the world and as per the rise of the cost of oil and gas. Do you think commodities will be used as political leverage tools by nations in the coming stage?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a balanced stick you use. I mean, try to reduce the impact of these prices by giving, I mean, starting to provide more products in the market. This is very important. I mean, to reduce the impact of the inflation rates.
Because you can see this, for example, between Russia and Europe. and how the gas component is playing a political part.
You mean between countries? Yes. Sometimes Russia will start to use this stick, to enhance their relations with these countries, or to impose kind of pressure on certain issues that is being between these countries. But still, the European countries are in need to the natural gas from Russia and other countries, because they are net importers.
They are net importers.
They are net importers. It's very important. They wanted to provide people with this very important
commodity.
Yeah, commodity, because it's very important to heating homes in Europe. The winter is very cold there, and they wanted to keep this under control, regardless the bill of the prices of the electricity there. And this very I think it will be a kind of they start to balance between the political issues, as you said, and to provide the commodity to their citizens.
Right.
It's very important actually, because to keep their position in a good.
So we'll wait and see how things develop.
Yeah.
Dr. Ibrahim Mostafa, former advisor to the Minister of Investment.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you
very much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure being with you. See you same time next week. I'm Ayman Salah. Good night.